The day started like any other on the quiet stretch of Highway 74, where traffic rolled smoothly and nothing ever seemed to happen, until it did. Blue lights flashed against the early morning sky as a black SUV was pulled over near a dusty gas station. The vehicle was clean, government-plated, tinted just right, but none of that mattered to the two officers stepping out of their cruiser. What mattered was who they thought was inside, and who he actually was. The man behind the wheel, calm and collected, didn't argue when he was asked to step out. He didn't resist. He didn't even flinch when the officer's hand brushed too close to his holster. He just offered his ID with a quiet steadiness. But it didn't matter. The badge he carried, one that read, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Director, might as well have been invisible. The officer didn't even glance at it. Nice fake, the taller officer scoffed, looking the man up and down. You think you can flash some DC nonsense around here and scare us? The man said nothing. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even mention his name, not yet. Because sometimes silence speaks louder. But the officers kept pushing. They made him put his hands on the hood. They patted him down. One of them even laughed, mocking his suit, calling it a bit too clean for someone from around here. They didn't know they were humiliating the highest law enforcement official in the country. They didn't know they were being watched. By a traffic cam, by passers-by, by the quiet power of karma. 6 minutes. That's all it took. 6 minutes from the first insult to the last smirk. And then everything turned. But before we go there, before the apologies, the desperate begging, the sudden switch in tone, we need to rewind. We need to talk about a different scene. One happening just a few states away, around the same time. A city bus, worn down but faithful, creaked along a tight corner downtown. A young black teenager sat quietly near the window, earbuds in, backpack hugged close to his chest. No one noticed him. He liked it that way until she stepped on. Pregnant, tired, holding her belly and trying not to wobble. She looked around for a seat, eyes scanning fast, face tightening with each bump of the road. No one moved, not a single person. Until the teen did. Without a word, he stood up and gently offered her his seat. He didn't expect thanks. He didn't expect anyone to notice. But she looked at him, really looked, and something passed between them in that short moment, a thank you that words couldn't capture. She sat down with a sigh, resting her hands on her belly. Then, as the bus lurched forward again, she reached into her purse, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and handed it to him. Read this when you get home, she whispered. And that note would change everything. 2 different places, 2 different stories, but somehow connected in a way no one could predict. Back on that highway, the FBI director was now sitting in the back of a police cruiser, handcuffed. The officers were laughing, joking about how they'd got themselves a federal faker. They hadn't run his ID yet. They hadn't checked the system. And the moment they did, their faces turned ghostly. But we're not there yet. Because what happened before, what that boy read in the note, what made him fall silent for hours after, was just as powerful. One story about abuse of power, another about kindness that ripples beyond what anyone can see. One moment of racism, another of unexpected grace, and in both decisions were made that would come back louder than words. So what exactly did the note say? And what happened when the officers finally realized who they'd cuffed? Well, that's where the story really begins. The note sat in the teen's pocket like it weighed 100 pounds. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he clutched it in his fist as he got off the bus, nodding politely to the driver, and started the long walk home. His neighborhood was quiet. Too quiet sometimes. The kind of place where dreams struggled to stretch and the days felt all the same. But that note had changed something. He could feel it, even if he hadn't read it yet. He walked past the corner store where old Mr. Johnson always leaned against the window and waved. Past the schoolyard, where rusty swings creaked with the wind. Past the cracked sidewalk his mother used to say they'd fix one day. And finally, up the narrow steps of the apartment building where the hallway lights flickered, and the elevator groaned like it didn't want to move anymore. He got inside, tossed his backpack on the couch, and just stood there for a moment. His heart was racing, and he didn't know why. It was just a note, right? People leave notes all the time. But something about the woman's voice, the way her hands shook slightly as she handed it over, told him it wasn't ordinary. He sat down slowly, unfolded the paper. The handwriting was neat but hurried. It said, "You didn't know this, but you saved me today, not just my body, my spirit. The world has shown me too much cruelty lately, and I almost gave up believing there were good people left. But then you stood up. No questions, no hesitation. My child will grow up knowing that people like you exist. And maybe that'll change everything. There's more I want to tell you. But first, go to this address tomorrow morning. Ask for Grace. She'll explain the rest. Trust me, it's important. More than you know." At the bottom was a street name, an area he'd only heard about on TV, where people drove clean cars, and the mailboxes didn't lean sideways. Somewhere he didn't belong. At least that's what he'd always believed. He read the note again, and again, then folded it, tucked it into a book on the shelf, and sat there staring into the dark until the city lights outside flickered out. Back on the highway, the two officers were sweating. Officer Donnelly had just finished typing the ID into his onboard computer. His partner Lopez stood frozen next to the cruiser, arms crossed, tapping his boot nervously. The response on the screen didn't make sense. Not at first. It said, "Classified federal clearance level. Contact Department of Justice immediately. Do not engage." But they had engaged. They'd handcuffed him, searched him, mocked him, accused him of impersonating a government official. The realization was crawling up their spines now, fast and cold. "Jesus," Lopez muttered under his breath. "This guy's... he's real." Donnelly didn't respond. He was too busy staring at the man they had left sitting in the back seat of the cruiser, like some low-level suspect. The man who hadn't said a word even when the cuffs went on. The man whose calmness now felt like a warning. "I think we need to call this in," Donnelly said finally, his voice thin. "Right now." "You think?" But neither of them moved. Inside the cruiser, the FBI director sat with his eyes closed. He wasn't angry, not visibly, but his silence was louder than any shouting could have been. He was thinking, calculating. Not about revenge. No, that wasn't his style. But about what this moment meant, what it revealed, because this wasn't the first time. And if he didn't use this moment to force change, it wouldn't be the last. He'd grown up not far from this very stretch of highway. Back then, his mother used to tell him, "Be careful when they stop you. Even if you're right, don't look right. Just be safe." That warning had followed him all his life, even into one of the highest offices in the land. And here it was, coming true again. He could already imagine the headlines if this got out. But this wasn't about headlines. It was about something deeper. Meanwhile, the teen couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about that woman's eyes, about her note, about this mysterious woman named Grace. It didn't make sense. Why him? Why now? But something inside him, maybe instinct, maybe something bigger, told him he needed to go. By morning, he'd made up his mind. He took the bus again, not the same one, a different line, headed in the opposite direction from where he usually traveled. Past the grocery store his mom always avoided because it was too expensive. Past the schools with iron gates and shiny windows. The bus stopped, in front of a building that looked more like a museum than a house. Tall glass doors, a garden that looked like it had its own gardener, and at the entrance a woman in a gray suit stood as if she had been waiting for him. "You must be Elijah," she said, smiling gently. He froze. "How did you—" "She told me you'd come." Grace. There was something calming about her. She didn't rush. She didn't ask too many questions. She just guided him inside, past walls lined with paintings, past a conference room filled with people in business clothes and ID badges, past the noise of the world into a quiet corner where the air felt lighter. "This place," she said, offering him a chair, was built for people who do the right thing when no one's watching. Elijah blinked. I just gave up my seat. You? Did more than that, she replied. You reminded someone that good still exists. He didn't fully understand, not yet, but he listened. She poured him some tea. Not the kind from a bottle, real tea. And then slowly, she began to tell him about the woman on the bus, about who she really was, about what she'd been through, about why his small act had meant so much. But she stopped short of the full story. Tomorrow, she said, you'll understand more, but for now, just know that your life is about to change, and not just yours. At the same time, Officer Donnelly was dialing a number he didn't want to call. Department of Justice Field Liaison. The voice answered on the other end. This is Officer Donnelly from Westboro PD. We need to report, we've got someone in custody. We think it's Director Alan Bryce. There was a pause, then a sharp, direct voice said, Put him on the phone. Now. Donnelly's hands trembled as he walked to the cruiser and opened the door. Sir, we didn't realize. The man took the phone calmly, nodded, and began speaking. But not loudly, not with rage, just with precision, purpose, the kind of voice that made people listen. Outside the car, Lopez looked at Donnelly. We're done, he whispered. Yeah, Donnelly replied. But maybe it's what we deserve. Because justice wasn't just about what's written in the law. It was about how people were treated in real time. And now the world was watching. And the teen who gave up his seat. His world was about to expand in ways he couldn't imagine. Because kindness doesn't just echo. It grows. And in the spaces where cruelty once lived, sometimes something powerful takes root. But that's a story for the next part.